I got something cool for y'all today. So I know I profiled my Naturia Runick deck before, but I recently just got into Masters with this, and I'm going to share the replays of me beating pretty much every other relevant deck in the format on my way up to Masters, going through, I believe the replays are all the way from Gold up to Diamond 1 to the match that got me into Masters. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of go through the deck, remind people of some of the combos, and if you have any questions, let me know down below. These are the ratios that I've been running, and I'll explain my choices in a few. So first off, we have 3 Mole Cricket. You want to see this card. If you open this card can be used to bait Ash if you want to play more of your Runic cards, or just bait out effects, or see what hand traps your opponent kind of has if you don't really need the summons off of it. Like if this is going to be not the most crucial play, or if this is the most important play that you have, you can use one of your Runic cards, summon Wings, and most of the time they'll Ash that, and then you can summon Mole Cricket and go off with Mole Cricket. But during the main phase, which this is your opponent's main phase or your main phase, quick effect, you can tribute it, special summon 1 Naturia monster from your deck, or you can special summon 2 Naturia monsters if your opponent controls a monster with the highest attack on the field, even if it's tied. If your opponent special summons monsters from the extra deck, or you special summon a Naturia monster from your extra deck while this card is in the graveyard, except during the damage step, you can special summon this card. You can only use each effect of Mole Cricket once per turn. So the fact that you can recur this easily on your turn is really great, or even on your opponent's turn when they summon something. Next we have Sunflower. I see some people running 2, but personally I think 1 is enough. If it gets removed, you will be in a little bit of trouble, but that doesn't happen too often. When your opponent's monster's effect is activated, that's just anywhere, in the graveyard, the hand, anywhere. Quick effect, you contribute 1 Naturia monster, and this card negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. Now you're probably thinking, well, 2 cards for 1 is kind of heavy, and yes, it typically would be, but that's why we have good old Naturia Camellia. This card is normal and special summon. You can send a Naturia card from your deck to the graveyard. Most of the time we send Tree, because Tree lets us get another Naturia from our deck to the hand, and also helps deck thin, and we'll get into that later. The effect that is relevant to Sunflower is if you attribute a monster to activate a Naturia monster's effect, you can send the top 2 cards of your deck to the graveyard instead. So this is awesome because sometimes you might only have 1 Runic card in your grave, you mill 1 or 2 Runic cards, now you have set up for Fountain, so it just makes that kind of flow a little bit better. I really like that. And being able to negate an effect, mill 2, and then be able to have another negate. The second negate you will have to tribute because you can only use that mill effect once per turn. But it's really great. And Camellia's third effect, in addition to being able to send a Naturia card from deck to graveyard and mill 2 instead of tributing a Naturia for a cost, is if your opponent would normal or special summon a monster, except during the damage step, you can special summon 1 Naturia monster from your graveyard. You can only use each effect of Naturia Camellia once per turn. It's a hard once per turn, but this card is amazing. Also, it is a tuner, and it being a tuner and an easy to summon tuner and an easy to search tuner, that really makes it, that just really makes it amazing, and you just have the option of going into just a bunch of different synchros, and we'll get into that in a bit. Next, I'm running Beergram Shelled Emperor, and I'm running him over the Kaiju, the Insect Kaiju, because you can special summon him from your graveyard and recur him, and his effect is pretty good. There are spaces where the Kaiju might be better, but this card is pretty sweet. Can't be normal summoned or set. Must be special summoned from your hand or graveyard by banishing 3 insect or plant monsters from your hand or graveyard. You can actually banish Max C as cost for this. So if you activated Max C previously and went off and drawn from that, the Maxi in the Grave can actually be banished for cost, which is really sweet. You can only special summon Beergrim Shield Emperor of the Forest Crown once per turn. Your opponent cannot activate monster effects in response to your spell or trap card or effect activations. This is great because you can just go off with runic cards and not have to worry. Once per turn during your main phase, you can destroy all face-up monsters on the field except insect and plant monsters. Also, this card cannot attack directly for the rest of the turn. So being able to blow up field is amazing. Being able to force your opponent to not be able to respond to your runic spells or traps is amazing. Well, in this case, just spells. There are no runic traps yet, but maybe in the future. Foolish Burial of Goods. You're going to use this to send Tree. So let's go ahead and talk about Tree. If this card's sent to the graveyard, you can add one Naturia card from your deck to your hand except Sacred Forest. You can only use one of the following Naturia Sacred Tree effects per turn, only once this turn. You can tribute one Earth Insect monster, special summon one level 4 or lower Insect Earth Plant monster from your deck, and the next effect is the reverse. You tribute an Earth Plant, summon a level 4 lower Earth Insect. I've used this a couple times. You'll probably see this in the replays. Those effects we don't really use very often. 90% of the time we're just using the, if this card's sent to the graveyard, add one Naturia card from your deck to your hand, except Naturia Sacred Tree. And that is not a once per turn. You can do that as many times as you want. And the best part about that effect is it even works when you discard it as cost for Runick Wings. So if it goes to the graveyard for anything, just anything, you can do it. There's even been times where I've needed to destroy it, it's been dead in my hand, and I've already basically controlled my opponent's field. So when I summon Baron to Floor, I'll set this, I'll pop it with my own Baron to Floor, and I'll get the search. So very good card. Another use for Foolish Burial of Goods is if you are all out of your Sacred Trees and it's just dead in your hand and you've already used Runick in Runick Wings and you don't really want to discard it, you can use it to send one of the Runick spell or traps that you don't need, and then you can activate another Runick card and use Fountain to go off to kind of replace that card in your hand. It's a roundabout way to go about it, but sometimes that's the best use for this card. Very rarely is that the best use, but sometimes it'll come up in extremely late game scenarios if you haven't already played Burial. So next we have 2 Triple Tactics Talent. This card is sometimes dead in hand, but if your opponent uses a hand trap against you and you really just really need to draw 2 cards to kind of get back in the game, this helps. Being able to also take control of an opponent's monster till the end phase sometimes has been relevant. Even more so if it's one that I can actually synchro with. Look at your opponent's hand, choose 1 card from it, shuffle into the deck, also pretty good. And you can activate this if your opponent's activated a monster effect during your main phase 1. So it's basically, or sorry, during your main phase. So it's basically just there kind of as a backup in case you're going first and one of your dudes gets ashed. Or if you get Maxied. Next we have 2 Runick Fountain. You should know what this does by now, but if it doesn't, if you don't, you can activate Runick Quick Play spell cards from your hand during your opponent's turn. Once per turn, if you activate a Runick Quick Play spell card, you can target up to 3 Runick Quick Play spells in your graveyard, place them on the bottom of your deck in any order, draw the same number of cards. This card's amazing, and it's not a hard once per turn for the draw, so you can play another copy and do the draw effect again. And you can even go into this guy, reoccur one of them from the graveyard, because he lets you add a non-quick play Runick spell when he is special summoned. So you can just use this effect over and over and over until you basically used every one of your Runick effects and just go off crazy, draw, set up board. You'll see that a lot in the replays. Next we have Runick Tip. So the second effect of all of the quick play Runick spells is to special summon a Runick monster from your extra deck to the extra monster zone. Only the extra monster zone, keep that in mind. You can only activate 1 Runick Tip per turn, and pretty much all the Runick quick plays have that. You can only activate 1 of these per turn. If it gets negated, you can activate a second copy, but that's pretty much the only case where you can. Runick Tips, first effect, add a Runick card from your deck to your hand except Tip, then banish the top card of your opponent's deck. Flashing Fire is target a special summon monster your opponent controls, destroy it, banish the top 2. Destruction is target a spell or trap your opponent controls, destroy it, banish the top 4. Freezing Curse is target an effect monster your opponent controls, negate its effect until the end of the turn, then banish the top 3. Runick Slumber. This one's pretty interesting. You can target a face-up monster on the field. Next time it would be destroyed by battle or card effect. This turn it is not destroyed. Also, it cannot attack this turn. Then apply this effect. Banish the top 3 cards from your opponent's deck. So let's say your opponent has a monster that can attack multiple times a turn, or your opponent has a monster you do not want them to attack with, or they declare an attack on something you don't want them to attack. You can activate Slumber, and then their monster will not be able to attack. Or you can use it for the intended effect, which is protect one of your cards from being destroyed. Both of these are very good effects. And then next we have Smithing Storm. It's banish cards from the top of your opponent's deck up to the number of cards they control. This is also an amazing effect. Most of the time I do use it for the second effect, special summon, because if I'm going first and I open this or whatever, and my opponent doesn't really have cards on board, unless they're playing tier, in which case that first effect might be resolved, it just depends. Next we have 1 Runick Golden Droplet. A lot of people don't like this because it gives your opponent a card, but if you're trying to deck your opponent out anyway, it's really not the worst. And if you can't play it, you can always use the effect to special summon a Runick monster. So Runick Golden Droplet, your opponent draws 1 card, then banish the top 4 cards of their deck. Pairs really nicely with Dispelling, where if your opponent adds a card or card from deck to hand, except during the draw phase, discard a random card from their hand, then banish the top 2 cards of their deck. Now that we've covered all the Runick cards, I would like to make a quick note. Sometimes when I play Mole Cricket, activate Mole Cricket, someone will activate Max C. If I'm going to go into Runick Wings anyway, I'll chain one of the Runick cards to Max C. That way it touches down before Max C resolves, and they don't draw a second card. They're only going to draw 1. So that's just something really quick to put out there. I know most people are aware of that, but there might be some that aren't. Next we have 3 Naturia Blessing. This card is amazing. It allows you to special summon a Naturia monster from your hand or graveyard. And that is pretty sweet. The second effect, immediately after it resolves, lets you synchro summon a synchro monster using monsters you control, including a Naturia monster. You do have to have a tuner for that. And the third effect is fusion summon 1 fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters you control, including a Naturia monster. So, really good effect. Not a hard once per turn. It's great. We've already covered Tree. So we're going to move on to the extra deck. Although you probably know Wings by this point, but if you don't, it's 2 Runick monsters to make it, which you'll never actually fuse for it. You're just going to use the Runick spell cards to bust it out. If it's special summoned from the extra deck, you can discard a card, add a Runick field spell from your deck to your hand. If another card you control be destroyed by this card effect, you can banish this card you control instead. If this card in the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, return it to the extra deck. It's also level 2, which is very convenient. Next we have Moon and the Runick's Wings. It's level 3, that's mainly what we use it for. If it's special summoned from the extra deck, you can discard a card, add 1 Runick continuous spell from your deck to your hand. That's if you're using the continuous spell for the deck. I personally don't like it because I bricked it too often. When your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a Runick card or cards you control, or set cards you control, you can banish this card and negate the activation. That occasionally is useful. And if you do destroy that card, once per turn during the end phase, gain 1,000 life points. That is the effect that has actually helped a lot, but mostly I have this in here because it's level 3. Next we have Jerry. Can't be destroyed by card effects. If it's special summoned from the extra deck, you get that target 1 non-quick play Runick spell, which is going to be the field spell, added to your hand. When this card is destroyed by battle, target 1 card on the field and destroy it. Decent effect. You can also run 3 Jerrys instead of the 2 Furkies. I personally just run 2 and 2. The reason I run 2 of this guy is because sometimes he just needed to help you get over the hump. I've also had a situation where he's 5, Amelia's 4, and then you have the Cricket, which is 1, and you make 10 for Baron, so that's also useful. But his effect is when an attack is declared involving this card in the extra monster zone, you banish the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck, neither player takes battle damage from attacks involving this card. If this card on the field is destroyed by battle or card effect, target 1 Runick quick play spell in your graveyard, add it to your hand. You can only use this effect to Furky of the Runick Bangs once per turn. This card is awesome. Also, making it be able to take 2 hits with Slumber has helped me really whittle down my opponent's deck before, and you don't take damage with it on the board, so it's pretty great. Well, from battles with it when it's on the board. Next, you have Beast. Beast is probably one of the best extra deck synchros of all time, in my opinion. 1 tuner, 1 or more non-tuner Earth monsters, so Camellia and Cricket. When a spell card is activated, quick effects on the top 2 cards of your deck to the grave. Negate the activation. If you do destroy it, this card must be face up on the field to resolve this effect. This is awesome. Beast is just completely awesome. Barkion is 6, so most of the time it'll be 1 Earth tuner and 1 or more non-tuner Earth monsters, so Sunflower and Camellia. And this card is really good because when a trap card is activated, you can banish 2 cards from the graveyard, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. This card must be face up on the field to activate and resolve this effect. This is pretty much the automatic win button against Labyrinth and Trap Tricks. This card's pretty insane. You're not going to use it against most meta decks, but it's good to keep in there in case you run into Labyrinth or Trap Trick or someone else doing shenanigans that involve a lot of trap cards. Next we have Stardust Charge Warrior. He's basically in here because he's 6 and because he lets you draw a card. When you Synchro Summon, you can draw a card. You can only use this effect, Stardust Charge Warrior, once per turn. This card can attack all special summon monsters your opponent controls once each. You're probably not going to do that very often because if you activate one of the Runick spell cards, you're going to have to skip your next battle phase. Make sure that even if you don't plan on using your battle phase, if you've activated one of the Runick spell cards and you don't need your main phase 2, you're going into battle phase, so you skip that so you have the option for next turn to attack if needed. That's something that's pretty important that I feel I should mention. But a lot of the time I'll go into him, draw 1 card, let's say Camellia is in grave, or I'll normal summon Camellia, or I'll activate Blessing to get the Camellia out of grave, and then I will use Warrior and Camellia to make floor. The other option is sometimes you go into Coral Dragon with Camellia and Hugin. And the reason why that's good is not only can you discard a card with Coral Dragon's effect, target a card your opponent controls and destroy it, if this Synchro Summon card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can draw 1 card. Now that's awesome because after we destroy something, we can activate any one of these Runick cards, get Jerry out, ideally get Fountain back from the grave, and then use Jerry and Coral Dragon to go into Baron to floor, and then also draw a card from Coral Dragon. So that's just pretty sweet all around, and making pluses off of securing your board is good to have. Circle of Fairies you won't use very often, but when you do, it kind of hits different. It's pretty great to have. During your main phase, you can normal summon 1 insect or plant monster in addition to your normal summoner set. You can only gain this effect once per turn. When a battle involving your insect or plant monster... when a monster is destroyed by battle involving your insect or plant monster, either your monster or their monster, and send it to the graveyard, you can target one of those destroyed monsters, inflict damage to your opponent equal to half its attack, the gain LP equal to the damage inflicted to your opponent. You can only use this effect Circle of Fairies once per turn. This has been weirdly relevant in some of the replays that you'll see. They should be included. Next we have Trish. If something floats or you need to get something out of there, or you want to neck a card out of your opponent's hand, Trish is the way to go. Really easy to make. Most of the time it's Hornet, Flower, and Cricket, which reminds me, we never went over Hornet. Hornet's effect is decent sometimes. You won't use it a lot, but sometimes it can actually just be the win button against your opponent. When your opponent special summons a monster, quick effect, tribute 1 other face-up Naturia monster you control, destroy that card. This is also great because if you reoccur Cricket somehow, or you get the special summon effect for another Naturia name for your graveyard with Camellia, there's just even more fodder for Horn Needle, and you can just lock your opponent out of special summoning. You'll see that in some of the replays. It's really good. But anyway, back to Trish. When Synchro Summon, banish up to 1 card each from your opponent's hand. The one from hand will be random, field, and graveyard. So, pretty sweet. Finally, we have Floor. I'm not going to go over Floor. If you haven't seen this card by now, Google it. It's insane. And then finally, we have Abyss Dweller. When this card has material touch its water, we don't care about that. That's not going to happen. Once per turn, quick effect, you can detach 1 material from this card. Your opponent cannot activate any card effects in their graveyard this turn, but you can still have graveyard effects. Yeah, that's it. for this. I hope that you guys enjoyed this profile. I'm very pleased that I made Master with this deck. It's a lot of fun. And once again, this video is sponsored by Dubby. You can use code SirLargeGaming to get 10% off. I'm going to leave you guys with the replays, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.